And welcome to everybody here in the chapel. We're so happy to be together. And this week, for this Shabbat B'yachad, which if you didn't know means Shabbat together, we are taking the opportunity to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, which is Israel's Independence Day, Israel's birthday, which this year is a big one, 75. And Yom HaAtzmaut, as well as Israel's Memorial Day, Yom HaZikaron, fell during this past week. And tonight we have the opportunity to not only be together in community, but to really think and reflect about all that Israel has been and is and may yet be, all of our hopes, all of our heartbreak, all of it. It's all here with us tonight as we are in community gathered to observe, to commemorate, to celebrate. And we're going to begin with Hine Matov, these words which were put to music in Israel in this way that we are often familiar with, this folk tune. Hine Matov, how good it is to be together. If you don't know the words and you'd like to follow along, they're on page 10 in your prayer book, and our Anson Religious School students are going to help us sing.
מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד.
To the Bima a couple more times, so please stay tuned. So I just wanted to remind everyone, or to let you know, that we have some fidget toys and things to keep you occupied if you need them in the back of the room, in some bins just there in the back of the room. When we have our guest speaker this evening for the Devar Torah, we will have an opportunity for any children to go and do some special activities with some of our staff. But of course, anyone is welcome to stay here throughout the service. And if you need a little something to occupy you, there are some fidget toys and things in the back. So we're going to light our candles, and I would love to invite anyone who has been to Israel in the last year. Is there anyone here who's been to Israel in the last year? And if you would like to come up to the Bima to help us in taking the honor of lighting candles, and I know that some of my family members are here and they were in Israel in the past year, but you know what? Also, if you have a trip planned and you're going to Israel, you are also invited to join us. Oh, look at all these people.
Wow.
This is awesome. You know, this is a really complicated moment to go to Israel, to think about Israel, and it is so important that we stay connected, specifically during a complicated and hard time. All right. So thank you so much. Candle lighting blessing is on page 2. If you'd like to follow, go ahead. Wow, this is beautiful. This is beautiful.
So exciting.
And you know what? There you go. Let's bring that light towards us. I always like to tell the preschoolers in their classrooms when we celebrate Shabbat, we bring that light towards us so that we can bring that light out into the world. And so just thinking about Israel and thinking about light and peace, shalom, we bring that light towards us and we sing the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai
Shabbat.
Thank you so much.
So we will continue welcoming Shabbat with Shalom Aleichem, which can be found on page 24 in your Sidurim. Shalom Aleichem comes from this notion in rabbinic literature that there are angels that accompany us home from synagogue on Friday nights and that stay with us through the entirety of Shabbat. And so we welcome those angels, we welcome that spirit, we welcome that, as the preschoolers say, Shabbat feeling into our space tonight.
And we sing this Israeli melody by Nava Tehillah.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharim.
Page 24.
Continuing on in our welcoming of Shabbat, we turn to Lecha Dodi on pages 20 and 21. Lecha Dodi is a Jewish mystical, medieval era acrostic poem that draws on themes of creation and redemption, imagining from where we are in our world as it is now, imagining the world as it could be, as it should be, a time when everyone has what they need, when everyone and everything is at peace. And so Shabbat is our little slice of that world as it could be, our little taste that we enjoy while we have it, and we hold on to that energy and we hold on to that hope throughout the new week, and we come back to it again and again and again, slowly as we're able, doing our one small action at a time to bring about that world as it could be and as it should be. Again, page 21, Lecha Dodi.
We'll do verses 1, 2, 5, and 9, and when we get to verse 9, the final verse, it's customary to rise and face the door to symbolically welcome that presence of Shabbat.
Time.
20. לקראת שבת, לכו ונלחם, כי מקור הברכה. אנושי קדם לסופה, סוף מעשה, משמע זה תחילה. יאי ליי ליי, יאללה לחדותי, יאללה לקראת כלה, יאללה פני שבת, פני שבת לקבלה, יאללה לחדותי, לקראת כלה, יאללה פני שבת, פני שבת לקבלה.
Verse 5.
התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בעורף קומי אורי. שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. יאי ליי ליי, יאללה לחדותי, יאללה לקראת כלה, יאללה לפני שבת, לפני שבת Verse 9. Ohabei Shalom, עצרת בעלה, גם בשמחה וצור עולם. תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, יאי ליי ליי, יאללה לחדותי, יאללה לקראת כלה, יאללה פני שבת, פני שבת לקבלה, לחדותי, יאללה לקראת כלה, יאללה פני שבת, פני שבת לקבלה. So having given Shabbat a very warm welcome, and hopefully being warmed by the presence of Shabbat, together in community, we'll rise as we're able for the Baruch Hu on page 28. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated.
Page 34, we turn to the Shema. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. Page 36.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
We turn to page 40 for Mi Chamocha, and we remember the conclusion of the precarious journey to freedom, which was in no way the conclusion of the journey. All the responsibilities that come with freedom, all the trepidation, all the awe and wonder and beauty and anxiety of that moment has played out throughout history as we as a free people now in our historic homeland as well as throughout the world continue to live out the responsibility of freedom. Page 40.
And even if you don't know the words, you know you can sing lie, 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 and we'll start exactly that way. Lie, 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 lie.
So tonight, as part of our, what I like to call our lullaby blessing, our evening blessing, Hashkivenu, it's found on page 42. We're going to focus just on the third line and then the very end of the blessing. The third line is Ufros Aleinu Sukkot Shlomecha, spread over us a sukkah, a canopy of your shalom, of your peace, God. And then the final lines say, blessed are you, Adonai, blessed are you, God, who spreads the Sukkot of Shalom, the canopy of peace, Aleinu, over us, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, and over all the Jewish people, ve'al Yerushalayim, and over Jerusalem. In this blessing, especially as we mark and celebrate, and particularly bring to mind and heart Israel on this Shabbat, I'd like us to really envision a canopy of peace, just embracing the land, the nation, all of the inhabitants of that land, that region, and really, as I like to tell our religious school students, really send out the energy of our prayer for peace to that place and to all of the world. And I think one way we can do that is by remembering we're not really praying for this outside force, God, to make peace. I think we're reminding ourselves that it is Aleinu, on us, up to us, to work for peace and justice, for compassion and dignity and equality and democracy, which so many of our siblings in the land of Israel are fighting to hold on to right now. So there's a lot of kavanah, a lot of intention that I've given you for this blessing tonight, which is really traditionally just simply a blessing we say at nighttime, that we be safe through the night. But let's access a sense of really actually power, that we have the power to be peacemakers, and it may feel like it's an impossible task, but we're not alone, we're together. In doing this, with that intention, we'll sing these lines. So beginning with that third line down, page 42. Ufros aleinu sukat, sukat, shalom echa, ufros aleinu sukat, sukat, shalom echa, baruch ata Adonai, apore sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
You'll turn to page 46 for the tefillah, the Amidah, the central prayer of our service this evening. We will pray the first number of pages together as a community, and then after the Kedusha on page 52, we'll take a few silent moments for personal prayer, reflection, meditation. You can feel free to continue with the words on the page or turn inward and be guided by the words on your heart and on your mind. You can remain standing or sit whenever you feel so moved. And we'll join together for a prayer for peace on page 62.
When we join together with our prayer for peace, we'll, at the end of the Amidah, we'd like to invite our Anson Religious School students, our ARS kids, and anyone else who is on the younger side. You can self-select, but to come up and help us with our prayer for peace. We're going to be doing another Israeli version by the group Nava Tehillah, who were here with us just last year. So we begin rising as we're able for the Amidah, page 46. Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei hakol, V'zocher chasei avot ve'imahot, U'mevii geula livnei v'neihem, L'ma'an shemo v'yahava, Melech Hozer Moshiach U'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Be'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Morid Hatal, Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Gevorot, Umidomelach, Melech Memit, Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kedoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh. We continue individually and we invite ARS kids to come up to the bima. Our prayer for peace is on page 62. And you're welcome to be seated. Shalom Biroma. Shalom Aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yotzei Teilel, ve'inu, Amen. you so much, ARS students. Wow, it felt like we could have just kept going and singing that. And I think that that makes sense because we must never stop praying for peace. We must never stop working for peace. And it's really inspiring because whenever I see our students and I tell them to really send that energy out, I can feel the energy of that prayer for peace coming from them, really from the heart. So thank you all. So we are going to transition to our guest speaker, our Devar Torah for tonight. Kids are invited to go with Cassie and Jen and Hannah for a special program. If you would like, everyone is absolutely welcome to stay here. And if you would stay here but would like something to fidget with while you're hearing the talk, you can do that with our fidget items in the back. But I'll give a moment just for folks who are choosing to go out to our kids program to do so. And we'll see you back here. Okay, so all right, have fun, kids. So I have the distinct honor of introducing someone I know pretty well to be our teacher tonight. And in an unbiased way, I feel there's no one better suited to helping us really be thoughtful about Israel in this moment. All moments in Israel's history have been complicated in their own way, but all of you here know that we're at a very precarious moment as democracy itself is threatened in Israel, as in our own country and so many other places. And Israel continues to face the other threats that it has always faced, the other crises for this very new nation, really new in the scheme of history and humanity. So I am really, really thrilled that Rabbi Jethro Berkman, no relation, just kidding, my husband, is going to share with us his reflections tonight. He has extensive experience for over 20 years in engaging with Israel, living in Israel, educating about Israel. He is currently the program director in Jewish education at the Mandel Institute for Nonprofit Leadership. And there he directs the Mandel Educational Leadership Program, which is a prestigious fellowship for leaders in the field of Jewish education. And he helps create Israel trips for them that really explore Israel's diversity. Previously, he was the Dean of Jewish Education at Gann Academy, our Boston area Jewish high school, overseeing Gann's Israel education program and 6-week trip for 10th graders. Before rabbinical school, Jethro lived in Israel for 3 years, most of it working for Seeds of Peace, a coexistence program for Israeli and Palestinian teenagers. This role allowed him to visit and hear the stories of dozens of Israeli and Palestinian families throughout Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. So I'd like to invite Rabbi Jethro Berkman up to share his thoughts on the various segments of Israeli society today. And thank you so much for being with us.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Berkman.
Thank you, Rabbi Berkman.
All right. Well, thank you. It's really an honor to be able to share some reflections on the state of Israel as we celebrate its 75th anniversary. It really is, I think, a remarkable thing that there's been a Jewish state for 75 years, and we are living in that time when this state exists after many centuries when there was no such state. So certainly a cause for celebration, but as I'm sure you're aware, it's also a quite precarious and tumultuous time in Israel, with a new government coming into power, with extremist elements proposing quite drastic judicial reforms, which has provoked nationwide protests and tumult in the country. So what I really want to focus on in my remarks is the divisions, the deep divisions in Israeli society that I believe undergird this conflict over the judicial reform. The judicial reform, I think, is really, and the protests and the chaos that it's caused are really a symptom of these deep divisions. And I think it's really important for us as an American Jewish community to better understand these divisions and the different groups, the competing, we could call them tribes, the competing tribes that comprise Israeli society. So that's what I want to talk to you about. This idea of competing tribes in contemporary Israel was popularized by the former president of Israel, Reuven Rivlin. In about 7-8 years ago, in 2015, he gave what's become a kind of landmark speech called The New Israeli Order, in which he made the claim that Israel is now comprised of 4 different tribes kind of competing for power, and that each of these tribes has entirely different value systems, worldviews, understandings of what the Jewish state should be. He says that, in this speech, he says that there used to be this idea that there's kind of this secular, liberal Jewish core and center that's really the vast majority. And then, oh yes, there's the ultra-Orthodox, and there's some Arabs, and there's some kind of modern Orthodox or national religious Orthodox that we need to kind of deal with. But really, there's this secular, liberal core. And Rivlin's claim in this speech, which I fully accept, is that that's just no longer the case. There's been an increase in the population of Arab Israelis, or Palestinian citizens of Israel, as some of them prefer to be called. The Haredi ultra-Orthodox population has grown such that we now have 4 relatively equal in power, if not quite exactly proportional in size, tribes that are competing with one another. And we need to understand who these tribes are and what the dynamics among them are if Israel is to move forward as a democracy. So I've mentioned 3 of them, I think, already. Let me just name these tribes as Reuven Rivlin, the former president of Israel, describes them. They are Arab, the Arab tribe, the secular tribe, the national religious tribe, and the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi tribe. There are also complex ethnic differences and divisions in Israel that I'll touch on later in my remarks, but these are the 4 tribes that I'm going to focus on at the beginning. And I'm going to, what I want to do is take a little time to speak about each of these tribes in turn. And I'm really lucky in that in my current job, I have the opportunity to lead trips to Israel where we spend time doing a deep dive into each of these tribes, visiting them in the places that are significant to them, hearing from their leaders, speaking with their students. My most recent trip that I led in December was for educational leaders. And so in addition with meeting with leaders of each of these sectors in Israel, we also visited each of their schools. And we observed classes and talked to school leadership. And that is something that's really remarkable about these tribes. One of the things that Rivlin points out, which some of you may not know, is that in Israel there are 4 completely separate public school systems, 1 for each tribe. There's an Arab school system, a kind of secular, what's called the Mamlachti, the kind of national school system, Mamlachti Dati, which is the national religious, which is for kind of the national religious tribe, and there's a Haredi, ultra-Orthodox school system, all separate. So we visited these schools, and what I want to try to do in the next few minutes is share with you what I've learned leading these trips, both from speaking with leaders of each of these sectors of Israeli society and visiting their schools. And what I want to try to do is, some of us may have kind of strong feelings about the tribes that, have a different ideas for Israel than we might have, but what I want to try to do is present the most generous picture that I can of each tribe, trying to understand them a bit kind of on their own terms, and try to see at least a little bit of the beauty that there might be in each of these tribes. So that's the goal. So I'll start with what we in Hebrew we'd call the Chiloni tribe, the secular tribe, schooled in the Mamlachti school system. So one thing we could say about this tribe, the Chiloni tribe, which, as I say, used to be kind of the dominant tribe, represented by the Labor Party in Israel's parliament, in the Knesset, which used to be, for decades, the dominant party, and now I think has maybe 7 seats out of 120. It's been which I think represents something about the way the dynamics of these tribes have changed. So one thing we can say about this tribe is it's probably misnamed. Most of people Israelis who call themselves Chiloni, secular, are not truly secular. Survey after survey has showed most of them are observant of many Jewish traditions. They celebrate holidays, they mark Shabbat in some way, but they're certainly not Orthodox. They bristle at Orthodox coercion, and they are decidedly liberal in their outlook. They value democracy. They embrace the core liberal values of freedom and the rights of the individual. And it's also fair to say that this group is by far the driving force behind the massive protests that we've seen over the past few months. But important to say that also folks from other tribes have joined these protests as well. It's not only the secular Israelis. Their kind of home base, their radiant center is Tel Aviv. No accident that the largest protests have been in Tel Aviv. So when I was in Israel, my last trip in December, I visited the Bina Secular Yeshiva, which is a yeshiva for young adults. There's post-high school, pre-army programs you can do there. And the idea behind this yeshiva, secular yeshiva, is that secular Israelis can kind of re-embrace the Jewish bookshelf and can study Talmud and Torah, but on secular terms and with a liberal perspective. So when we visited Bina, myself and these American leaders in Jewish education, we studied Talmud with 18 and 19-year-olds who were in a pre-army program. It was so exciting to see them grappling with the Aramaic of the Talmud and translating it into modern Hebrew and talking about the ethics that lay behind it and demonstrating, kind of living out their commitment to engaging with Jewish texts and Jewish tradition, but from a liberal and secular perspective. So I found that really inspiring and hopeful, in fact, that we see the kind of secular group engaging with Jewish tradition and kind of getting a little, perhaps more understanding of the culture that more traditional groups might embrace. So now I'm going to move on to the Arab tribe. And I'll start with a word about the school we visited in December. We visited the Jawad High School for Gifted Students in East Jerusalem, which our conversations there exemplified many of the complexities of being a Palestinian citizen of Israel, of which is about 1/5 of Israel's population, if you don't know, are Arab Israelis, or what we could call Palestinian citizens of Israel. So I sat in on a chemistry class, which was entirely in Arabic, so I couldn't follow it that well, but it was an incredibly dynamic class with a really skillful teacher, students up out of their seats scribbling equations on the board, collaborating with each other, solving complex chemistry problems. And after the class, we sat down with the students and asked them about their experience and their aspirations. This is a school for gifted students, really, high-achieving students. Many of them shared that they aspired for careers in the field of high tech. Many of them shared that they aspire to go to Israeli universities, which are the best universities, in the area, like the Technion in Haifa was a popular choice. Oh, I really want to study at the Technion. But they also shared their ambivalence, first of all, about just mastering the Hebrew language. Obviously, Arabic is their first language. They also spoke English really well. And in order to take the Israeli matriculation exams to study at Israeli universities, they needed to really master Hebrew. And they had a lot of ambivalence about that. They want to succeed, they want to move up and in some ways integrate into Israeli society, but they also feel that learning this language is kind of a submission to the dominant culture, and a culture that doesn't necessarily respect their culture. And they felt, had a lot of mixed feelings about that, which was powerful to hear. Like many Palestinian citizens of Israel and East Jerusalem residents, they at once resent the discrimination that they feel that they experience, and they begrudge Israel's occupation of the West Bank, which affects many of their family members, cousins, and relatives. But at the same time, they hope to rise and succeed within Israeli society. So I can just imagine how difficult and complicated it must be to be an Arab Israeli. So next I want to talk about the Dati Le'umi tribe, the national religious tribe. So these are the Orthodox Jews who are not ultra-Orthodox. They wear maybe a knitted kippah like this, kippah sruga. They see themselves as kind of the vanguard of Israeli society. You know, we embrace Jewish tradition. We know our Talmud, we know our Torah, but we're also big nationalists. We support the state of Israel. We serve in the army. There's been a notable shift over the decades with the secular kibbutzim once being the primary feeders for the most elite units in the Israeli army. Now it's the national religious yeshivot that are the biggest feeders of the elite army units in the Israeli army. Something that I think not a lot of North Americans know is this is a deeply intellectual tribe within Israel. They have, there's a wonderful journal called Mikor Rishon, which means first source, which has a weekly supplement, which engages with secular philosophy and the creative arts and literature kind of in dialogue with Jewish tradition. There's a lot of deep thinking, deep immersion, both in the traditional Jewish sources and in secular sources, and psychology, and a lot of profound thinking emerges from this tribe. They are, of course, the leaders of the settlement movement. They have a deep love for the full land of Israel and a belief that this land in its fullness was given to the Jewish people and that the Jewish people should settle this land in its fullness. So right after the day after we visited the secular yeshiva in Tel Aviv, we drove to Kfar Etzion, which is in Gush Emunim, which is kind of a settlement block right outside of Jerusalem, and we visited the Makor Chaim Yeshiva, which is kind of one of the leading light high school yeshivas in the national religious camp. And I'll just share personally, I have profound disagreements with most of the folks in this tribe about settlements in particular. Religiously, I also have differences with them. But I just have to tell you what an amazing experience I had at this yeshiva and how impressed I was with so much that I saw. We were invited to study Talmud with the 10th graders. There was a room about this size filled with 200 to 300 teenage boys studying yeshiva, studying Talmud together in pairs. And it was really a rowdy scene, a lot of shouting, reading out loud, gesticulating, climbing over chairs, a lot of kind of freedom for the boys to kind of, move while they learned. And one of the leaders of the school brought me over and said, "Hey, why don't you study with these two guys?" And these kids were such mensches. They scrambled to find a chair for me to sit in. They scrambled to find a book. They said, here we are, here's what we've been learning. They were totally better Talmud students than I am, more advanced than I was. They were so patient, bearing with my imperfect Hebrew. making sure that they didn't move on until they were sure that I had understood the passage that we were on. And I was talking to one of my colleagues who knows this yeshiva well afterwards, and she said, yeah, they say that you can talk to someone at a bus stop and know by the way they interact with you that they're from this yeshiva, Makor Chaim, because they're have such kind of gentle, kind souls. And that's what I experienced. We spoke with the head of the yeshiva, David Zinger, this incredible spiritual leader. He spoke to us of the importance of educating the whole child, cognitively, emotionally, ethically, spiritually, of the importance of listening to and trusting children, and of his commitment to bringing his students to meet with and better understand all segments of Israeli society. He organizes these encounters, and with the Palestinians who live in the next village. They go over there, they meet with them, they hear their stories, learn about their lives. National religious. And so finally, there's the Haredi tribe, the ultra-Orthodox tribe, which in some ways may be the most difficult of Israel's tribes, I think, for us to relate to. Again, I have to emphasize, I really found a lot of beauty in our visit to the schools. We visited the Netzach Yisrael Boys and Girls School in Beit Shemesh, which is kind of in between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, just a booming, very religious town, adding thousands of residents every month. Really a booming town. We visited these Haredi schools, separate girls' school for the girls and boys right next to each other. It was an amazing lesson. I visited a third grade classroom in the girls' school, which was very poignant for me because my youngest son, Idan, is in third grade, and I just couldn't help thinking, how different is this education from his education at the Burr School in Newton? What's happening in this classroom? So the teacher, this young woman, led this incredible lesson. It was about prayer. The class was a class in prayer. She put this big gift, kind of big gift-wrapped package box on her desk and had the kids guess what's in it. They're all guessing all these different things, different toys and everything. They're guessing all wrong. She opens up the top and takes out a big kind of model of a phone. And then they spend some time talking about phones and what happens when we talk on the phone. What can go wrong when you're trying to call someone and you on the phone? Sometimes they don't answer. Sometimes you get bad reception. Sometimes it can be busy, right? And it slowly emerges, this very active lesson, role-playing and really well-crafted lesson, that the phone is a metaphor for prayer. And the lesson that comes out of this is the teacher telling them that when you pray to Hashem, right? That's what they say, Hashem, God, right? When you pray to God, you never get a busy signal. You never get disconnected. Hashem will never hang up on you, And then this message that Hashem is always there to listen for you, to listen to you, to your hopes, to your worries, to your troubles. God is always there for you. God will always listen. I have to say, I found it a very beautiful lesson, and it aligned into this message of a compassionate, kind, listening God who is always there for you. I think it's actually a very spiritually healthy concept for these girls to learn. The girls were energetic, they were healthy, happy, expressive, and it was such a positive experience for me visiting this class. I want to share two more things about the Haredi community that I think it's really important to understand that I've learned through these visits. One, to a degree that I don't think I understood, the Haredi community is trying to rebuild what was lost in the Holocaust. They were decimated by the Holocaust even more than other Jewish communities. Houses of Torah totally decimated, their communities murdered. Obviously this was widespread, but I believe even statistically that the ultra-Orthodox community was hit harder than any other type of Jew, and they view it as a sacred duty to bring that Torah study back into the world and to bring their communities back into the world, all that was lost. They see this as a sacred duty, and I think it's born both of hope and of trauma. So that was one thing that I've learned. Another thing that I've learned is the degree to which they see themselves as an embattled minority trying to preserve something that's really, really precious. A way of life that they hold dear, that's very precious, kind of in this sea of a majority that, doesn't appreciate that way of life. So, look, I have profound disagreements and even anger about some of the things that the Haredi community does and has done in Israel. But at the same time, I try to remind myself these two motivations of trying to bring something back to life that was destroyed in the Holocaust and trying to preserve something that you believe to be really precious are things I can understand, and motivations that I can understand. Those are the 4 tribes. I just want to, before I conclude, just one more thing that needs to be mentioned in the complexity of today's Israeli society and the protests and the new government and all of that. And that is another rift that exists, in some ways distinct but overlapping with the 4 tribes. And that's the Ashkenazi-Mizrahi divide. Okay, the country was founded mostly by European Jews. European Ashkenazi secular elites dominated the country for decades. Hundreds of thousands of Jews from Arab countries, that's what Mizrahi Jews from North Africa, from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, from the Middle East, from Syria, Iraq, immigrated to Israel and were treated as second-class citizens, were sent to live on the periphery in poor housing, felt that their culture was denigrated, that their traditions that they brought with them was denigrated, seen as inferior to the secular Ashkenazi culture and the religious Ashkenazi culture. Also important to note, Mizrahi Jews are more than half of the Jews in Israel. Okay, more than half of the Jews in Israel are of Arab, come from Arab, Middle Eastern, North African countries. They're, not, I guess, white. They're not, Ashkenazi. And they have kind of a more traditional view than the typical secular Ashkenazi Israeli. And many of them are, there's, of course, tons of kind of intermarriage, you could call it, with Ashkenazi, and many are moving into the middle class and, very prestigious positions, and, Arabs too, Arab Israelis too, moving up in Supreme Court and in the Knesset. But there's still profound resentments that remain. In fact, just this Purim, little anecdote, just this Purim, a Dati Le'umi, National Religious Girls' School, put on a Purim spiel that was basically racist, making fun of Mizrahi Jews. They put brown paint on their face and imitated the Mizrahi accent. And so you can see this kind of prejudice against the Mizrahi Jews. Again, more than half the Jewish population still exists. So look, it's these resentments that exist among the tribes and among the Mizrahim that have led to a lot of this crisis. I'm, kind of a secular liberal. I'm sympathetic to the Supreme Court, but I think it's important for those of us who hold those views to understand that many Mizrahi, many more traditional Jews, many Haredim, many of the Dati Le'umi community, saw the Supreme Court as kind of being used as a secular cudgel to kind of impose secular mores on Israeli society, in spite of kind of traditionalists winning the elections, right? Likud has won most of the governments have been right-wing, more conservative governments, and they see the Supreme Court as kind of taking away that earned electoral right to kind of legislate, okay? So I think that provoked a big overreach by the current government, which, as I said, has real extremist arguments, a counter overreach saying, you cudgeled us with this, we're going to take away all of the Supreme Court's power. So I really think it's important to understand the way these social and historical dynamics are kind of underpinning what we see happening today. Many secular Israelis will, and legal theorists will acknowledge, yes, the Supreme Court probably has gone a little too far and was in need of some correction, but not a huge overcorrection like this. So my hope is that we can find, first of all, in this judicial crisis, that we can find some middle ground. As a secular, liberal, Democrat, I could see some room for correction and some judicial reform. Maybe there is room for something that, to an extent, curbs some of the power of the Supreme Court without decapitating Israeli democracy. And finally, to conclude, on the deeper level, not only the judicial reforms, but in order for Israel to resolve this crisis and to move forward as a healthy Jewish democracy, the 4 tribes and Ashkenazi and Mizrahi Jews really need to learn to better understand one another, to work together toward the common good. They're never going to agree on everything, but there can be areas of overlapping interest. There can be deepened mutual understanding. One of Rivlin's big points, none of these groups is going anywhere, and none can dominate the others into submission. There needs to be some kind of accommodation, some way of working together. And there is cause for hope. Recent polls have showed kind of a movement away from the government's extremist rhetoric toward a more middle ground, a more balanced center, a desire to learn more about the other tribes and to find ways to live together may be incubating. And I think that all of this, if this can happen, this movement towards seeking common ground, towards seeking a common good, then this is in line with our tradition. The Talmud teaches that the house of Hillel taught the legal arguments of its kind of legal enemies, the house of Shammai. And not only did they teach Shammai's teachings, but they taught Shammai's teachings first, an example of listening to and understanding the perspective of the other. And even more important, the second temple, the second commonwealth, was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. The Talmud tells us because of sinat chinam, because of baseless hatred. So my hope is that the modern state of Israel can learn from the mistakes of our forebears 2,000 years ago, learn from what their sinat chinam, their baseless hatred, led to, and that the deep ruptures in Israel's society can heal, and that while these tribes may never agree on many matters, extremism can subside and make room for mutual recognition and compromise, and that a Jewish and democratic state can survive and thrive for many years to come. Thank you.
Yasher Koach. I know that Jethro will, I'm sure, stick around for the oneg to take any questions. We have a couple of minutes. I wanted to allow for maybe 2 quick questions if we have them. They're probably not going to be quick because this is not a quick and easy subject. But if anyone really had anything, any burning questions that you wanted to ask, I did want to give us a minute or 2. Yes.
Roughly, how are the Mizrahi Jews in Israel distributed among the 4 tribes that you've mentioned?
Oh, great. And I see that at least one other person had the same question. Did you hear the question, Jethro?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, great question. It may sound surprising to hear this, but I think they're actually represented in all tribes, even the Arab tribes. And by that I mean that some Mizrahi Jews would describe themselves as Arab Jews. In fact, the famous Israeli novelist Sami Michael describes himself as an Arab Jew. There are Arab Haredim, which is a very strange thing because it is kind of borrowing, I think, from the Ashkenazi tradition, represented by the Shas party. Most Mizrahim attend, in terms of the school systems, attend the secular school systems. But they're not really secular in the same way. So really, I think that the best way to describe it is there's some numbers of them in each of the tribes, also in Dati Le'umi, but really there's kind of a fifth tribe that we could call Mizrahi traditionalist, which is not orthodox, not halakhically observant, but really deeply respects tradition. You know, the kind of cliche is they, go to shul in the morning or, and then go to the soccer game in the afternoon on Shabbat.
That's kind of like us. Okay. Our other, another question. Go ahead.
Seeing global disagreements between the tribes, did you feel and saw the indications of them to resolve these contradictions?
Look, I think there's evidence that points both towards hope for cooperation and towards, deep rifts. Just in the last government, just before this government, for the first time, there was an Arab party in the government, which is a huge thing, right? But then on the other side, talking about the Arab tribe, now we had the violence in mixed cities, which was certainly a heart-wrenching step backwards. In the Haredi sector, it depends on who you talk to. I work for Mandel. Mandel has a Haredi leadership program. I meet all of these Haredi leaders who were like, yes, we want to come more into Israeli society. We want to, work and earn money, and we want to, some of us join the army or do national service. But that's what I'm seeing. There are other social analysts who see more of the deeply conservative side of the Haredi population that may be having even more children and who are skeptical. So I would say that there's just no way to know. There's like evidence pointing in both directions.
All right, thank you so much for those questions.
I'll stick around to answer more questions.
Yeah, if you have more questions, also I know where to find him. So if you have other questions and want Jethro's email address or anything like that, I know for a fact he'd be happy to follow up with you. For now, what we're going to do is sing a special musical piece, Bashana Haba'ah, B'Yerushalayim, for which we have members of our wonderful band and choir. Thank you to David Spar for organizing a newly reformed group to play music and to sing. And this song, with which I think many of you are familiar, but it has a lot of verses. And Bashana Haba'ah you can find in your prayer book, in your Siddur, on page 348. So we're going to sing that song, and we have a special blessing for the state of Israel that was written just in the last month or so by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen. And then we'll move toward the Misha Berach and to conclude our service, and we'll have a special celebratory dessert afterwards.
So I'll just say, just by way of introduction to this particular song, it was written by a woman named Nurit Hirsch. And I'll say the lyrics to it, B'Shana Haba'ah, right, come from the very end of our Passover Seder, where we say, B'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, right? This statement of hope, again, acknowledging the world as it is and hoping for this world as it could be, should be. And Nurit Hirsch wrote this song about life in Israel and this kind of hopeful idea, an ideal that she and many other Israelis aspire to in the scheme of Israel's existence. And I think it's really poignant, as actually David Spar pointed out to me this morning. Nurit Hirsch was born in 1948, the same year as the founding of the state of Israel, and is a very famous musician there and speaks so deeply through this song and many, many others to the Israeli spirit. And so I hope you enjoy.
Page 348 if you want to sing along.
ילדים בחופשה, יזכו טוב
our TOS band and choir. Thank you, David Spar. Okay, at this time, we're going to share a special prayer for Israel, or read it. We don't have it in our prayer book because, like I said, it was just written by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, just in honor of this year's commemoration of Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom HaZikaron.
And actually, the title of this prayer is a prayer for North American Jews, for us, on the 75th anniversary of Israel's founding. Right? As both Rabbi Berkmans have mentioned, there is incredibly complex dynamics at play, historical, cultural, interpersonal, on so many levels of Israeli society and on so many levels of the ways in which we, as non-Israelis, but as Jews who may or may not feel connected to Israel, might relate and might show up in spaces where we can grapple with those dynamics as well. Source of life, maker of wonders, bless the state of Israel and all the inhabitants of the land. Protect her with infinite compassion. Spread over her your shelter of peace. Strengthen the hearts and the will of its citizens, calling out for justice and democracy. May their voices ring out like a shofar throughout the land, a budding redemption. Help them replant what has been uprooted and tend what has been neglected, so the seedlings of promises of refuge and equality blossom and thrive. May their feet not give way. Let them not tire, nor slumber, nor succumb to fear. Grant strength and courage. Nurture a shared future for all who call the land home. Healer of the brokenhearted, sustain our hope. Help us celebrate what is and what was miraculous in Israel's founding. Help us grieve all that has been lost in the realization of that dream. May we be strong enough and honest enough to carry the shattered along with the whole. May our love and our commitment to the vision of the prophets endure like honey from the rock. May we be partners with the divine and with all the inhabitants of the land in establishing and protecting justice, peace, and joy. And together as a community, we say,
Amen. At this time, we're going to offer a prayer for healing for all those individuals, those we know, maybe those we don't know personally, but those whom we're holding in our hearts, who are in need of any kind of healing. Refuat HaNefesh, healing of spirit, or Refuat HaGuf, healing of body. We'll sing the Mishaberach L'Cholim, the healing prayer, in the middle of page 253. If you have people in mind for whom you are praying, I just invite you to say that name quietly, or those names quietly to yourself, because we're a large group tonight. And I also want to invite those who are joining on Zoom. You can type names into the chat. Those of you on the live stream, also, please bring names aloud into your space wherever you are as we offer this prayer. From our community, I do want to mention some names of those for whom we are praying. Wally Bishop, Jody Kraft, Yaakov Achaya, Bat Karen, Elisa Simon, Enid Ship, Alicia Knopf, David Selden, David Ben Emmanuel, Yehuda Verivka, Harvey Solomon, Chaimer Ben Shlomo Vechanalea, Joseph Siegel, Yosel Ben Ruth, Linda Hoffman, Leah Bat Kayla, Esther Neshama, Karen Weber, Esther Tzvia Bat Asher Venachama, and Judy Shepro. Page 253.
Leimon
Bless those in need of healing with refuah shema, renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, This time we'll turn to Aleinu on page 282, and we'll rise as we're able in body or spirit.
Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'teit gedula liotzer breshit, shehu noteh shamayim ve'yosed haaretz, u'moshav yekaro b'shamayim bimal, u'shchinat uzo b'gov hei meromim, hu Eloheinu ein od, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. 287, Benemar, V'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom ha'u, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
We may be seated. At this time, we have the opportunity to recite Mourner's Kaddish for close loved ones whom we are mourning either at the time of a yahrzeit, an anniversary of a death, or during a period of mourning. And I know that we as a community are holding in our hearts Doris and Saul Feldman as they mourn their beloved daughter, Henrietta Hetty. And we're so glad that you are here among us, with us tonight, Doris and Saul. And you are not alone. So we remember with love Hetty Feldman. And also tonight, I want to mention the name of our uncle, the brother of my mother-in-law, Hank Bennett, who died suddenly this past week. May his memory be for a blessing. Any others who are reciting Mourner's Kaddish tonight, for anyone in particular, I'd like to invite you to rise or just simply to raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you. And those of you on Zoom, and you can see in our service bulletin members of our community who have died at this season in years past that we're remembering. Those of you on Zoom, please feel free to bring the name into our space through the chat, and also those of you on the live stream, please feel free to say names of those you're remembering, just aloud in your own space. And I'll give you the chance to just share the names of those you're remembering tonight. May their memories be for a blessing, Lori. May your memory be for a blessing, Henry. May your memory be for a blessing. May his memory be for a blessing. And now we'll all rise for Mourner's Kaddish, page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, Bialma divra chirute, Yamlich malchute, B'chayechon uvyomechon, U'chaye d'chol beit Yisrael, V'agala u'bizman kori ve'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. יתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקדושה בריחו. לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen. We can be seated. May the memory of those we hold in our hearts, including those whose names we've mentioned, and of course, for Saul and Doris, they also are always remembering their beloved son Peter, along now with their daughter Hetty. May all whose names, whose souls we hold dear, may their memories be for an eternal blessing. Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. So before we conclude our service tonight with another version of a prayer for peace, like I said, you can never have too many. We'll have any kids who are still with us singing Odiavo. You'll join us on the bima, so you can get ready to do that now. You can actually start coming up. I just want to share a few announcements. First of all, I want to thank our staff, our volunteer ushers tonight, our band, our choir. Thank you to Alex Brodsky for running tech. Thank you to Mark Gale and Elio Cohn and David Spar and Andy O'Connell. Thank you to Donna and Dana and Ted and Denise. No, who was singing with us? Lindsay, Denise, and Ted. I got Ted. It's amazing to have a band and a choir, and you too can sing and play music with us. It's not super competitive to get in. That doesn't take away at all from the high caliber. I'm not saying at all. As you have heard, this is wonderful music, but we're just saying that you are welcome, even if you think you shouldn't be. We'll welcome you. None of this is coming out right. Anyway.
Do you hear what she's saying about you, David? Did you hear what she's saying about you?
At least they know me well enough not to. David's not going to take it personally. Okay. So I want to thank everyone, and Cassie and Stacy and Sherry and Jen Whitman and Hannah Cherwin and so many who made tonight possible, and Jason Krieger for cooking our delicious food. And I just want to share a couple things. Tomorrow morning, I will be leading our service here at 10:30 a.m., including delving into a little study, a mini study session in the midst of the service about Parashat Kedoshim, where we are now right in the middle of Torah, and we'll be with our sister congregation Shir Chadash. Will be joining us, reading Torah for us, so we hope that you will join us. We'll also have some nice refreshments after services tomorrow morning. And this week, I will be teaching the first of 3 sessions for a new lifelong learning course that is really about what really happened at Mount Sinai. What was that revelation of Torah all about? So tradition says we were all there, so you probably know what happened there, but if you want to look at what our sages thought about imaginatively about what happened, what did we hear at Mount Sinai as we are in this Omer period before we commemorate the giving of Torah with Shavuot in a few weeks, please come to that class Wednesday on Zoom at 7 p.m. Details are in your newsletter. Lots more to say.
And just a real quick plug, please, please, please mark your calendars for June 13th. That's a Tuesday and we'll be here from 4 to 7 for our community's mitzvah day. This is our day of doing good. We will have projects all over the temple building, both benefiting our synagogue community as well as a number of nonprofits. We're going to be putting toiletry kits together for the women's lunch place. We're going to be making handmade pet toys for the MSPCA. We're going to be doing all sorts of really, really wonderful stuff and healing the world one small action at a time. So I really do hope that you all can make it. There are activities and options for people across the age and ability spectrum. And we're just so excited to be able to do this and to bring this opportunity to you all and to show this city, you know, just like how much we care about each other and about our neighbors. So I hope you join us.
It's all happening on 6/13. There are 613 mitzvot, sacred obligations.
Get it, right?
June 13th. That's not a coincidence. All right, so ARS friends, are you ready to pray for peace again? And this, you're going to send it out. You're going to send the peace out to the whole world, right? We're going to sing Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, which includes the word salam, which is shalom, but in Arabic. Sing with us. You ready?
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu.
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Shabbat Shalom. Please join us for dessert out in the foyer. Cupcakes for Israel's birthday.